Hello, Rob, the editor of the Biomedical Scientist magazine here. Welcome to the latest instalment of the new podcast series from the IBMS. Each episode of this podcast is based on the Twitter Spaces chats that take place on the first Wednesday of every month. In this episode, we discuss equity, diversity and inclusion, often shortened to EDI, with Francis Youngblower, who is a laboratory manager and a clinical scientist at the Great Ormond Street Hospital. He's also a member of the IBMS EDI working group. Towards the end of the discussion, we're joined by Tamina Hussain, a lecturer in biomedical science at the University of Salford and also a member of the IBMS EDI working group. I hope you enjoy the episode and remember that this can be used for your CPD. Francis, welcome to the IBMS chat.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Francis, do you want to tell us first off just a bit about yourself, your background and your job so people know where you're coming from?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So currently I'm the laboratory manager at Great Ormond Street Hospital. I'm also a HSST clinical scientist. So I'm now coming up to, I believe, 14 years in the profession. I started working 3 years in a district general hospital in Essex, and that's where I kind of started my training, so I got to kind of see a bit of everything. And then when it became time for me to move to a specialist BMS post, I completed the specialist portfolio and moved to Great Ormond Street. I had a lot of opportunities there, which I took. So I finished my master's at Queen Mary, which I did in clinical microbiology. I continued to also do the IBMS qualification, so a certificate of expert practice in leadership, quality and training. I did the high specialist diploma so I could get my fellowship with the IBMS. And then I was kind of unsure of my next step. So I joined to do the NHS Leadership Academy program. So I did the Elizabeth Garrett Anderson program. And that was really, really good because that actually made me see the bigger picture as well in terms of not just the lab, but also how we're connected to the wards and also how everyone else interacts as well with pathology and laboratory medicine. But I kind of decided the career path that I want to go forward with is trying to become a consultant. So that's how I've kind of got onto HSST, but I've taken on the lab manager as role on as well. So busy boy. But yeah, in terms of background, I mean, I'm British born and bred. My background is quite a mix. So from my mother's side, she's actually from Sri Lanka, but she was actually born in Malaysia, and all my family are actually in Malaysia. And my dad, who's not around anymore, sadly, he was from Mongolia, but I was born in the UK, in West London, and grew up there, but then moved to Essex for my first role. But I'm now back in London. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
That's brilliant, and a very impressive CV and list of achievements there, Francis. Just while we're waiting for Gemma to hopefully be put down as a co-host, can you tell us what made you want to become a biomedical scientist in the first place, Francis, before we got onto equity and diversity?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Well, I tell people this story, and I think sometimes they don't actually believe it, but it's a true story. So, I mean, my mum came to this country. She was brought over as a trainee nurse, so she came over when she was 18, and she's been in the NHS ever since. So I've always grown up with someone working within the NHS. My mum started off as a nurse, but then became a midwife. And I saw how dedicated my mum was to her job, how much she loved it. And then there was one day I went in with my mum to work, so she had to go collect something from her office. And then when she went in, she parked up, and it was literally outside a lab. And then I could just see these, scientists working. There were microscopes. I was like, oh, wow, that's so... Because at the time, it was A-levels. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I did quite a random assortment of subjects. And it wasn't until I didn't get the grades that I wanted, which I was kind of thinking maybe I'll go to journalism, but I didn't, because I didn't get the right grades. But I did actually better in the sciences. So I kind of investigated a bit, went through UCAS clearing, and then completed an IBMS accredited degree. And then, yeah, the rest was kind of history. So that's how it kind of started. But it was a true story. My mum parked up. I was just sat in the car while she went in, and I just remember seeing this lab. I think it must have been a histo lab, and they were kind of had all their microscopes they were looking through. And I think I saw that, and I just thought it was fascinating because actually you see so much of everyone who's like frontline, nurses, doctors, and that's what we hear a lot about. But I think something that we try as a profession to kind of put forward is actually the people behind the scenes. And I just found it fascinating that actually there are people in the lab, and actually, I could just see the work that they were doing, and I could, put together that actually they're making a diagnosis for a patient. And that's what, kind of made me be inspired to be a BMS.
That is a lovely story. Can you remember which hospital it was,
I
Francis?
do. So I think my mum, it was Wexham Park Hospital at the time, because that's when my mum trained. So I think she was going with her friend, like visiting, so they kind of went inside. So that's where we went to visit. And then I think there was a second time I actually went with my mum when she was going to work, and that was in Ealing Hospital.
Oh, lovely, Francis. Right, let's move on to the main topic for tonight, which is equity, diversity, and inclusion in biomedical science. So, Francis, can you tell us a bit about what that means to you?
Well, to me, I guess if I reflect back in terms of period of time through my career, I think as a profession, it's wholeheartedly important that we really focus in terms of science. That's what we're here for, science, and actually making that connection between, that translational connection between making differences with treatment and clinical management. And that's kind of the key role of a BMS. But I think I've learned over time that we need to also remember there's an individual behind that test, performing that test, and actually they are a person, and there's actually more behind them than just being a scientist. There's a background, they're a person, they've got characteristics, they're an individual, and that's what actually makes them unique and special. And actually, it's one individual that's actually part of a whole team. And I think you've got to remember that individual has different perspectives, different thoughts and feelings, and they contribute quite greatly to how a service runs. So I think I think as a professional body, I think we've actually done quite well moving forward and actually recognizing more about the people behind the scenes, and actually recognizing the individual and actually the individuals that make a team. That actually we've got a large number of people from different backgrounds, different characteristics, they've got different perspectives, different life experience, and actually we need to remember that relates to the patient as well, because they are individuals coming in to a hospital with different backgrounds, different characteristics, and different life experiences. And so we kind of mimic what they would expect and the care that they would actually want to receive as well.
Oh, brilliant. So it's a bit like in the way that people say kind of art is a mirror reflecting ourselves. I think they say of the media as well sometimes. It can almost be like that in the healthcare service, where you want a vibrant workforce that reflects the people who they're treating, I suppose.
Oh yes, no, definitely. I think so, because you care. I think personally you care more, because I mean, I'm less lab based now, but I've always happened that when working in the lab, that there was always a patient behind that sample. And there were samples that were critical where clinicians would come in and say, we need this one urgently, or have you got a result on this, what we can do. And you try and prioritize it, because then I just think of the times when I've maybe had to go with a loved one to A&E, and you're waiting, and then you have a test done, and that result, a negative result is just as important as a positive result. And it will change what management you receive. So I just think it is definitely a mimicry, because I think we have to think like that as well. Like, just think and have it in your mind all the time that actually the treatment you receive, you want to also give out as well. So that's something that I'm quite passionate about, and I've always been throughout my career, and it's something that I always try to embody on my team as well. Like when we have huddles or team meetings, we discuss errors and discuss why the error happened, but then also thinking of the bigger picture of actually, well, hold on, so this is what the outcome was for the patient. Actually, if they got this result a bit more sooner, or actually if we hadn't made this error. And sometimes it may not be too big a deal, but you have to think, what if you were in their shoes? So it definitely has to be a mimicry, I think.
Oh, definitely, I completely agree. And I mean, what are your personal experience of any kind of negative or positive experiences about this with your job in the workforce, Francis?
Oh, is it as in like as working as a BMS, just in
As in, I suppose, have you ever struggled with issues to do with equity, diversity, and inclusion, or is it something you've not come across personally?
No, I have actually. I think that's probably why I'm more, over time I've become a bit more responsive about it and thinking actually we do need to do something about it. I mean, I could go back as far as university. So I remember when I started my degree, we had kind of all submitted our coursework in, and then we were all going to the campus to the like science block to go and collect our results. And I got my result, and then I was like, I got 92% on my first piece of coursework, and I was amazed. And then one student turned around and said to me, "Oh my gosh, I'm so surprised you got that." And I kind of thought, hold on a minute, what made you say that? What you've judged me immediately on what I wear, on who I am, and so I always kind of hold that back in my mind when I reflect on things, or making decisions, that people can sometimes have an unconscious bias, and I really hate it, because I just think you can't judge someone just by being a cover. Don't judge a book by its cover. And that was something, I always thought, well, so that's always my earliest experience that I remember from uni. It was really, really, really tricky. And I guess, I mean, this was very early on, so this is not in my current workplace. But quite a while back, I did experience a bit of, well, when I first started as a trainee BMS, there was another man who was working in the lab, and everyone was kind of making comments behind his back about his mannerisms, about him being very camp. And I felt I had just come out as a gay man, and I felt very, very uncomfortable how they were talking about him. And for me, that meant that I couldn't be myself at work. And I always had a professional hat on, and I did my job. I was polite to everyone, and that's how I felt I had to be. And I always remember at lunchtime, we kind of all gathered one lunchtime, and then a group of people asked me, "Oh, so is there anyone you're interested? Any girl?" And then at that point, I felt my insides turn inside out, because I was just like, "Oh my gosh, why are they asking this?" I felt put on the spot, and then I said, "Well, I'm interested in men." And actually, they were all really, really nice about it. It was fine, but it was just that scenario, um, that actually made me feel so uncomfortable, and it just made me think, well, everyone has a right to be who they are. You should respect everyone's individuality and not judge them. So it just, yeah, I will always remember that. And there was a there was a second one following that, which was um, a retirement meal. So I had gone for this retirement meal, and it's a social time, so it's not in the workplace. There were drinks flowing, and when I am having a good time and I'm laughing, I have quite a high pitched laugh. And then someone who was retired had come over to me and put their hand on my shoulder and said, "You should just make sure in future you don't laugh like a little girl." Um, and then when I heard that, I thought, "Oh gosh!" And then I just kind of went in my shell again, because I thought, I'm being judged on who I am as an individual, as a character. And I just thought, and it really knocked me for six, because I thought, I'm such a hard worker. I've not done anything wrong. We're in a social situation, and I can't laugh. So, yeah,
Yeah, it's awful.
yeah. So, I mean, those are two kind of like negative experiences that I've had. Well, three. And so I've always reflected on those, and just always made me think going forward how, again, others should be treated as well. So yeah, those are things that have kind of put me back a bit, and I think that's why I think it's good that we push forward in terms of EDI, and kind of recognizing that everyone's different and individual, and that everyone is actually just treated equally.
Completely. Are things getting better, Francis? Because you read a lot. I see a lot of progressive thoughts in newspapers and in the media and online, but you also see a lot of horrible kind of identity politics and bigotry. And is there a gradual shift towards things getting better, or am I living in a little bubble of nice people who I hang out with? So it seems like things are getting
Oh no.
better.
Well, I think so. I do think things are definitely getting better. If we like reflect back to maybe 10 years ago or further, I think that time compared to now, I think definitely there has been progress. But I still think there needs to be progress, because I don't think it's hitting everyone. And I think it's just about education, or just having an open discussion. I think people just need to be able to talk and have conversation, feel free to have a chat. And be open as well, because I think that's the problem, and be willing to listen, and not just kind of say, well, no, this is how it is. I think if you've got a narrow perspective, you're not seeing everything. And I think, we're all scientists in this profession. We should have a thirst for knowledge, and also have a thirst for wanting to see other people's perspectives as well, because I just think it's boring. I think I find it fascinating learning about other people, where they're from, their characteristics, interesting facts. I just find it fascinating, and I just think, there's a lot to learn, and I think people have to recognize people don't choose to be someone, they are that person. I didn't, wake up one day as an Asian man who's gay. That's who I am, that's my identity. And I think we definitely have made progress. However, I think there's still a way to go, because I know there's always discussions I've seen sometimes, maybe on Twitter or on other places, mention of, oh, why do we still need pride? I think it's needed more than ever now. I mean, we're getting to places, but there is still, I think, things that need to be done in terms of education, and just open discussion, and people wanting to learn or listen. So,
Oh, completely. I remember when a while ago with Black Lives Matter, just around the corner from my house, someone had put up "All Lives Matter" on something. And so I think you're kind of missing the point there. But tell us, I mean, the way we make progress is through great things, initiatives, awareness, and people driving change forwards. And one of the ways that the IBMS is trying to do that is the EDI group, which you're a member of, Francis. Can you tell us a bit about what the EDI group is for those who don't know?
oh yeah, sure. So, the EDI group consists of a number of different individuals, different backgrounds, that come together every so often. We meet usually on a Friday, and it's either virtually or, in person, face to face, in London. And it's just an opportunity to actually say, what do we want to do to help promote, EDI? And I think it's, do you know what? The first meeting that we had, I really, really loved it, just because it was so nice to actually have so many different individuals there, to hear their stories, and actually just to hear what has happened, in their background, in terms of like their work experience or life, or things that have happened to them, and actually what they want to do to make things better. And there's been so many great thoughts, suggestions that we're kind of pushing to drive to make change, such as kind of education, promoting. And I think it's been really good going forward within the biomedical scientists, that there's a page now on different, different things related to EDI, and I've seen some really good articles on a number of different issues, that all, just to kind of inform people about, what's going on within different communities, religious, etc. And so I think it's really, really key. There was one that resonated with me, and when I read it, I could relate, because one of my colleagues, suffers from polycystic syndrome, and there was an article about that, and it really, she's been going through a lot in the workplace, and I've kind of been managing her. And then when I saw this article, I shared it with her, and I said, have a read, and just don't feel like you're alone. And I'm here, and you're not alone. There are others as well, because we had several. I mean, I'm sure she's, happy for me to say this, but we had several meetings, one-to-ones, where we chatted, and she was in tears, because again, it was affecting how she's coming into work, and she was a hard worker, but then, there were issues with sickness, or things in the work, but there was a reason for it. So, when I saw that, it really touched my heart, and it was nice to share it with her as well. And she was really glad to see it, but also to see that she wasn't alone.
Yeah, and yeah, we try and put these articles in the magazine and cover as broad a range of topics as we can, and cover topics that we maybe haven't covered previously. That there's quite an active push to make sure we're covering diverse and inclusive topics. So if anyone listening thinks that there's anything that we should be covering, then please do let us know. You can either jump in on the chat here, or you can send me an email. But one of the things I was interested in, Francis, I remember when the group was first formed, it was the E stood for equality, and then I think after we published one article in the magazine, and it changed to equity. Which could you explain a little bit about the difference between those two terms, and why that change happened?
Yeah, so I think equity, just again meaning more accountable, so everyone's more accountable for everyone being equal. So I think that's really quick key. I mean, we should all there should be equality amongst us all, but there should be equity there.
Oh, brilliant. And we've just had a message that was come in from Michelle, who said, I've been disappointed by the views of some former work colleagues and professionals who are bigoted, especially as they know I have a non-binary child. Yeah, completely agree, Michelle. I don't think I'm sure everyone listening here tonight would agree that there's no space for bigotry in the workplace at all.
No, definitely agree. And this is the problem. I think it's that people making assumptions without trying to read or talk to someone or just education. I think that's something we're doing within our trust at the moment. In that so last month was Pride Month, and I think something that we did, which was really, really good, is that we had like a Teams meeting, and we got external speakers to come in and talk about different issues. So being non-binary, that was a topic area, and someone actually came in to talk about it. And actually, the feedback from that was really great because people could listen, people could talk and have discussion, and it was just to learn and just to get someone else's perspective, because not everything is kind of straightforward. So I think it's just to recognise that. And I think that's really, really key. So, no, I think that's it's a shame. And again, like I say, that's the need for having EDI and working to try and promote that. And so I think that, again, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
And do people, when you say you've had people come in to talk about all these different terms, I mean, do people understand these terms, non-binary, intersectionality? Are these things the typical biomedical scientist knows about?
No. So I think that's what's been good about these sessions as well, because most of the people who've come in to speak about them have actually done an introduction and that actually said, before I start, let me explain to you what the definition is. And they've kind of done that and then gone behind some of the history, and then actually given some like life examples in terms of their life or what they've tried to do to promote it. So it's been really good in that sense, because it's starting off with that definition, to that clarity, to say, well, this is actually what the definition is, and here are people of of that characteristic, of that gender, etc. So yeah, it's been good in that sense. So yeah, people come in as like not knowing, but then actually I think they leave learning a lot.
Yeah, that's a brilliant thing. And what are the main issues that we're facing as a workplace? Are the issues of the profession any different from the kind of wider societal issues, Francis, or is it the same thing?
Um, I think it's the same. I think it's the same thing. I think again, within all our labs, we're all very, very busy. I think there's a lot going on, and I think it's having that time to learn about everyone as well. I mean, I do think it is getting better in that I feel like there's been a lot done to work to promote and educate as well, and I think that's something not just within our professions. I think within hospital trusts and within healthcare, we are getting a lot better at trying to kind of promote and educate and make awareness. I think that's the thing, because if people don't know about something, it's making people aware about it and actually saying there's resource here to learn about it or to get more information about it. So,
and one of the main awareness drives, which you just mentioned earlier, or it's a bit crass to call it a drive. It's a celebration. Is Pride, and the IBMS has been involved in Pride. You mentioned it earlier, Francis. Tell us a bit about when the IBMS was involved in Pride and kind of what that meant and how it went.
oh yes, yeah. So we didn't march in Pride this year. Hopefully, going to march next year. But we marched in Pride last year, and I just absolutely loved it. So we put in an application. It was successful. And then we kind of got to work in terms of promoting and actually seeing how we're going to march. So there was a lot of support from the IBMS, which is really, really good. We got lab coats with the IBMS logo, and it was in a kind of rainbow colours. We also had little goodies to give out to people. So it was the little fuzz bugs that said, I love biomedical science too. And so it was such a real feel of like teamwork and being a group on that day, because we all kind of met at one spot. We were all kind of dressed in the same uniform, and we all marched together. Everyone kind of did themselves up. Some people put glitter on, rainbow paint, and we just all like were ready to go. And then it was kind of that anticipation just before we're about to start to march, and then we started and we passed the go line. And then once we passed, it was just amazing just to hear the people clapping and like yelling. And then we came up with a chant as well, which was, oh gosh, it was 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh gosh, sorry, it's gone from my head now. But
That's all right.
but
We've got another half hour of the chat for you to remember it, Francis. But
so
it must be really nice and refreshing to. Often these things, issues with equity and diversity inclusion are kind of pitched as battles almost, and you have to fight for things and fight for equality, and it must be really nice to have something where you're not fighting, you're not battling, you're just completely celebrating.
Oh yeah, I think that was because it was a big celebration. It was just great. But what was really nice, because it was a really big group. I think there was 50 of us all together. And it wasn't just people from London. People had traveled from like Portsmouth, someone from Wales, and to kind of be part of this group, which was amazing. But then it made you aware that actually as an individual, so if I reflect back to 14 years ago when I started as a trainee BMS, and I identify as a gay Asian male, that actually I came to this celebration and that I was not alone. I was with a group of mixed individuals who were amazing people, so lovely, and we were all there to celebrate ourselves as individuals and characters, but also celebrating the profession as well, promoting the profession too. It was really nice walking down and having quite a few people say, we had actually quite a few saying, I'm a biomedical scientist, or there were students at like University of Westminster saying, I'm studying biomedical science at the moment. So yeah, no, it was really nice. It was just nice to have that celebration. As you say, there's always kind of challenges, and having to fight for things, but to have a day where you come together as a group to celebrate, to kind of march, to say, actually, we need to carry on working, to promote, to actually work to develop things further. It was just so nice. And I remember I actually cried at the end of the Pride March, because it was such a moment for me, because I just kind of thought, gosh, I wouldn't have imagined it. I would never have imagined it. And so the fact that we managed to do it, it was the first time that the IBMS had ever marched in London Pride, and it was just amazing. So reflecting back on it and looking back, it was just like a moment in history that I'll always remember. And just remember when we got to the end, I was like, oh, got all emotional and teared up, and yeah, and I think everyone just felt so proud. And it was just nice to see as well, just the response on social media as well, because then I kind of posted pictures and I was looking at what the IBMS had posted, and kind of the reactions, that there were so many likes and loves on Twitter, on Facebook, was so nice, because then actually you were getting support from the profession. It wasn't just the individuals from that community. It was everyone supporting, and there were nice comments too saying, so glad that you've done this. So it's just nice that people could see the importance of it from the profession, and see that actually it was something that we needed to do.
And if anyone needs any proof of the great celebration there, then it was either in, I think it was in the June issue of the magazine, but it might be the July one that's just dropped, where we've got some pictures of Pride, and you can see Francis, a nice article about Pride he's written, and yeah, there's some pictures of him. It looks like he's having a lot of fun. But yeah, you mentioned earlier on, I think it was the article on polycystic ovary syndrome, and there are lots of issues that people might not think fall under the umbrella of EDI, but obviously polycystic ovary syndrome is something that's only ever going to affect a woman, and there should be no prejudicial treatment. Do people kind of realise and understand the things that fall under the umbrella of EDI, do you think, Francis? Or do people just think it's about getting rid of racism and homophobia?
I think so. I think that again is another education piece as well, because EDI is a really large umbrella. It covers so much, because there's so much diversity. It's not just about race or sexuality. It's age, it's gender, disability. There is so many things under that umbrella. And again, it's so many unique individuals making a group. So I do think sometimes it does get lost. And I think it's just because again, one or two things, like a few events have happened, these have stemmed, and I think people associate it with this or this, but not actually realizing actually there's a lot more to it. I mean, there's even like professional prejudice I've seen in the workplace, and not recognizing how many, actually all professionals contribute to a patient's care. And that really gets me as well. So EDI covers a lot, and actually I think that is a separate education piece, because I think when people hear EDI, there is a kind of stereotype or bias to think, oh, it's just this and that, but actually it's not. And I think that's a big thing for people to think about, that actually it's a big umbrella that covers a lot of different characteristics, individuals, and it's just trying to ensure that everyone is treated with equity and equality.
And we've had a couple more questions that have just come in, or comments here. Hannah says, this is a really interesting session. Would be great to hear more ideas about what lab managers can do to set a positive tone for inclusion in our teams. So that's one for anyone listening. Please do join in the conversation and send a comment there or a question. And Francis, do you think there are any specific things that lab managers can be doing to set a positive tone for inclusion?
Yeah, I think we've got to firstly recognise who is in your team, where are they from, what, and actually recognising their individuality. And I think it's very difficult. I think so. I wrote an article a little while back about emotional intelligence, and I think it's actually having that recognition of people, their background, and actually how they're feeling. And I think it's important to promote anything that's happening, because again, we have people from again all different backgrounds, all different characteristics, and I think it's important to try and celebrate everyone's kind of celebration when it comes to time, because again each day is important. We have Christmas, that's important for a large number of people, but there are other celebrations too. And I think just acknowledging that as a team, and actually, recognizing there are individuals in your team who are celebrating that, and to acknowledge that as well is really, really key. And so I think for lab managers, I think it's having a bond with your team, because I understand completely there has to be a line in terms of management, and having that line, but there is also a line, I think, of leadership, and actually leading your team to actually get people to to lead the team, to recognize there are different people that are wonderful people, and actually celebrating them, celebrating their religion, their background, their pride, what have you. When those days come, I think it's really important. I think lab managers just I think even just sending an email to a whole team as a whole, just to say um, happy whatever day, I think it really reaches out, and actually it recognizes the different individuals within your team.
Exactly. I mean, these are they're very small things to do, but things that can make people feel welcome and accepted, and they can have a big impact on morale and on your team.
Yeah, no, 100%. I definitely think so, because I think again, it's just recognizing that your team consists of so many different individuals, but then it also brings awareness to other people who may not know about certain things, and so actually, again, it gives that opportunity for people to say, oh, happy Diwali, or happy Eid, and just to give that recognition to people, because it's actually special to them, and it means a lot to them. It's something that people have grown up with, and I think recognizing, and it means a lot to them as well. In terms of celebration, for religion, or for characteristics, it's really, really important. So I think even just sending out an email on specific days to the whole team as a whole, just to celebrate that day, really, really means a lot, I think.
Agreed. We've had another comment coming from Michelle Payne here, who says, open conversations are really important. People can be scared to start a conversation or ask questions for fear of getting it wrong. I'd like to hope the younger generations in our workforce are better at this, and that more experienced colleagues can learn from them.
Oh, I 100% agree with that, because I think people should not fear to ask questions. I think I always say, and this is I always link this to training when I train someone, and then they're kind of like, you sign them off as competent. You're like, right, you're on your own, but I like, you need to ask questions. Don't ever feel like you just have to go off. And I think that's the same when you're bringing new individuals into the workplace. The first thing I always ask is, sorry, just to check, how do I pronounce your name? Because I think sometimes you see someone's name and you may attempt it, but there is no harm. And actually, I'd rather get it right. And I ask, sometimes I may ask several times, but I prefer to do that and get someone's name correct, um, as well when I'm introducing them to the team. And so I think there has to be open discussion. People need to feel free and feel that they can, be approachable as well. I think that's the best way of learning, is just having that open discussion, and conversation.
And we've talked a fair bit about EDI in the workforce, and how positive attitudes can have a positive impact on the workforce. Can it have a tangible impact on patients as well, or is it just a case of, I say just a case, that sounds too flippant, is it a case of people feel more welcome, or can there be tangible health benefits and outcomes as well, do you think, Francis?
I think there can definitely be health outcomes as well, because again, you don't want. I, again, we I always, I mean, it's questions we set in the registration portfolio, but I say every sample is important. You don't treat it separately. You don't put one before the other. You need to treat them all equally and all fairly. And if you get a request form, or if your limb system is completely electronic and you scan, you don't see a name and make a judgment or assumption about something. So I think it definitely has an importance for healthcare as well, for patients as well, because they want to feel treated equally as well, and feel like, when they go somewhere, they're not put behind because of a characteristic, a name, or anything like that. So I think it does have an impact, because you've got to recognise that the work group that you're in also reflects the diverse community that you will be serving.
And we've mentioned a bit about what managers can be doing, and but I'm not a biomedical scientist. I'm a journalist. But if I were a biomedical scientist, what should scientists be doing to be allies, Francis? What should everyone be doing?
Oh, well, I think that everyone should, firstly, as scientists, I think we should be naturally driven to want to learn, to inquire as well and ask why, or oh, how come. And I think it's always good to ask questions, and not feel fear. And I think it's going back to that conversation, or that comment question about having more open conversation. And I think that's just something we need to kind of bring forward. People shouldn't be fearful to ask, and I think it's really nice for people to ask. And people also, from the other side, if you're being asked something, you shouldn't feel guarded, that why is this person asking. People like to learn. People are from completely different backgrounds. So I was born in West London, and my parents, again, they are both from different backgrounds. Um, I, even though I've got this diverse heritage, I only speak English because my parents only communicated in English. But because of how I was brought up very diverse. My mum's friends and family, were from all over. She had Afro Caribbean friends. She had friends from China. She had Irish friends, and so I got to meet a wealth of different people as I was growing up. People may grow up in different areas, and people's lives change or take different pathways. You may, for example, be somewhere quite rural, and you might move somewhere like London or Manchester, which is quite diverse and has a different group of people. And actually, you notice it. You will notice it straight away when you move somewhere. When you walk on the street, or what have you, that, oh gosh, this is different from what I'm used to. And so actually, with that, you shouldn't fear to ask questions, because it's learning. It's a lived experience. And so I don't think it's ever wrong to ask questions, but then I also think people should never feel guarded if someone does ask questions, because you need to, again, have that unconscious bias to look and think, well, actually, I don't know this individual. I don't know where they're from. I don't know their background. Let's learn more. And I think it's good to be inquisitive.
Oh, completely. I grew up in a small kind of northern market town with absolutely no diversity, and I feel like there was a lot more uncertainty and probably, to be honest, racism there and then as soon as I moved to London, where and in Peckham, where there's a very diverse range of people and lifestyles, everything all of a sudden seemed a lot more accepting. So maybe part of it is that lived experience, and once people know and have interacted with people from different backgrounds, then there's no fear and less prejudice.
Oh no, definitely. It's really difficult because again, we're all from different backgrounds, and I think it's hard unless you've started from a child. I mean, again, this is to do with education, I guess, in terms of like introducing people to, again, different religions or characteristics or people, and just recognizing there are people from different backgrounds. They've got different cultures. They speak different languages. There are people with neurodiversity, disabilities, etc., and actually recognizing those individuals and actually what they can bring and actually their lived experience too. Because I live in London now, and I have quite a mixed group of friends from all over. So I've got people from up north, from Cornwall, who've kind of moved to London, and they have kind of learned a lot through lived experience too. So no, I think lived experience is good, but I also think education is really really key.
I completely agree. And we're joined by Tamina here as well, who we've been unable to get Gemma on due to technical difficulties. So you've kindly joined us for the last 15 minutes or so. Do you want to say hello to everyone?
Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Francis, as well, for stepping up. I'm sorry I couldn't be here for the whole session and that I've joined late, but yeah, I'm here now.
Hi.
Oh, that's right. A pleasure to have you. Can you tell us a bit about your background, Tamina, and your role in the EDI group?
Yeah, sure, of course I can. So I'm a National Council member for the IBMS, and just last year, after speaking to Deborah, I can just see that she's joined as well. So last year I approached David and Deborah and Linda at the IBMS and just spoke to them a little bit about sort of my supporting statement when I first applied, to become a council member. And one of the things I mentioned, what I wanted to work on was about representing different backgrounds and communities and sort of, promoting more inclusivity and that kind of thing and representing the diversity within our profession. That was just before Congress, and after Congress, I think just around August. So we put a call out to create this EDI working group. That was launched in August last year, and we've done quite a bit of work since then. So I lead on that along with the deputy EDI lead, Colin Mudd, who's also a council member, as well as Linda and Sue Jones from the IBMS. And since then, we have done quite a bit of work, and all of the members from the working group have contributed. So you will have noticed, the different articles that come out every month in the magazines, as well as on social media. And I feel like we've kind of done quite a lot in terms of, marketing and communications. There is a lot more work to be done, but I do feel like we have achieved quite a bit in a short space of time. And we are going in the right direction.
I completely agree. And are there any initiatives and activities planned going forward, or is that still all in the pipeline?
There is. We are having a lot of discussions around how to kind of gather data. The data collection is a big one. So initially, the sort of EDI data that was gathered, it was part of a benchmarking exercise with the Science Council. But the way that the IBMS scored themselves was sort of, if the evidence was there, then they'd give them a higher score. But if the evidence wasn't there, then it was a bit of a lower score in some areas, sort of like a UCAS approach. So we've kind of gone off that benchmarking exercise and looked at what areas to prioritise, and actually, the communications was a big one, and we've done quite a bit in that area. The next bit that we want to look at is sort of capturing data of the membership. There is a bit of work going on in the background, with the new website and how to kind of gather that data, but also sort of getting that out to the members as well. Why we need that data. So for kind of encouraging members to complete any surveys or a questionnaire when that new website is launched, around their backgrounds. So we can kind of, once we've got that data, we can look into what work we need to do more on. That is in the pipeline. It's just taken a bit longer, and something that the comms team is working on at the moment.
And in your professional capacity, Tamina, you're the deputy program lead for the biomedical science apprenticeship degree and a lecturer in biomedical science at the University of Salford. How do you feel the younger people who are coming through are with EDI? Will we have the same issues in the workforce in 10, 20 years' time? Or do we have a far more kind of progressive approach from younger people entering the profession?
I feel like there is a massive difference from what I've seen so far in my role at the university. I do feel like there is a lot of diversity. We have people from all backgrounds, and there is, it's inclusive. We are in the right direction, and actually it's a lot better than it was. So I do think we are making progress. There's still work to be done, but again, like I say, it's going in the right direction, and I feel that people from different backgrounds as well are a lot more confident. Just going back to what you and Francis were speaking about earlier around, people shouldn't be fearful about speaking or asking questions. I think there is a lot more people who are confident in speaking now about their backgrounds and, in general, asking questions. To give you an example, I've had experiences in the workplace where I've been asked a question, I don't know, just around my hijab. So I wear the scarf on my head and we call that the hijab. Something that's extremely personal to me. But I've had people ask me questions such as, do you go to sleep in that or do you have a shower in that? And you can sort of, the tone that it's kind of asked in, you can understand whether that's a serious question or not. But then recently I've had people reach out to me. We've just celebrated Eid last week, and someone reached out to me and just asked, really politely, I hope you don't mind me asking, but I wanted to know a bit more about the Eid and why you celebrate it, just to have a bit more of an understanding. So when my colleagues are celebrating, I have a bit of an insight, and I was happy to answer that question. It was nice that someone reached out and they were actually interested. And then I had someone else in a senior position who's an IBMS portfolio verifier, and they were due to carry out a verification for a candidate in Ramadan. And to kind of ease that candidate into the verification process, they wanted to start a conversation around how Ramadan was going and just have a bit more of an insight onto why we fast. And again, I just felt like that was a really nice way. And the fact that the verifier got in touch with me to ask, whether it was appropriate or not. And I was really encouraging about it. I said, as long as it's asked, politely and respectfully, I'm sure the candidate won't mind. But they wanted a bit more information on Ramadan in general, just so they were able to ask the question confidently without worrying that it would upset the candidate. So it's just specific, like examples really of how we can learn about different backgrounds, and not just religion, but everything.
Yeah, no, completely. And I think these are great things when people are coming forward and respectfully asking about things, because quite often people can kind of fear their own ignorance. So if they don't know about something, then they don't dare ask about it in case it upsets someone or it shows them up as not having the knowledge that other people might have. Whereas as long as you ask it respectfully and you're genuinely inquisitive, then those are great things.
Yeah. And the other thing is as well, I mean, the membership survey, the last survey, the results from that, there was feedback around, raising more awareness around disabilities and that kind of thing, and that has been taken on board. So again, you will have seen in recent months articles on neurodiversity, for example, so autism, and then we've also got someone in the working group who is deaf, so they've written articles on how we can support colleagues in the lab who, are deaf but can still carry out their work, and the fact that it doesn't affect their role in any way, and what else we can be doing to support them. There's lots of things, and I think the important thing is we're all learning. It's a journey for us as well in that group. We're all learning about each other, and things that might not occur to us, and you think, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about it like that, and then you learn from that experience, and you're better then. It's all about using what you've learned and taking it as a lesson.
Brilliant. We've just had a question that's come in, or it came in a few minutes ago. Sorry, I missed it. From Professor Heather Caudle. My apologies if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, Heather. I would ask you if you were here, but you're a listener rather than a speaker, so my apologies if that's not the correct pronunciation. But her question is, we know there is a strong connection between the experience of colleagues in teams that are not frontline and that of patients from marginalised group. Are the leaders in your organisation interested in your views on EDI and how you are treated to help the wider community? And that's for Frances or Tamina, if there are any strong views on that from either of you two.
Sure. Frances, do you want to go first, or I don't mind?
Yeah, sure. So I think, as we talked about previously, we have had made quite a bit of headway in terms of progress from senior management. I think they've actually been more kind of forthcoming. I think with staff surveys that we've sent around lab medicine in terms of looking at everything in terms of diversity and representation there. And so we've recently got our staff survey back, and we've met as a kind of management group with clinicians and lab managers to have those discussions and actually see what can we do to try and make things progress further for the next year. So I think from a senior management view within lab medicine, it's definitely within my organisation, I can see progression and the support there to try and make things better. And I think something that's quite good within individual trusts is that there are separate networks for different groups. So I'm part of the Pride network at Gosh, and we've got other ones such as Reach, and again there's just a number of groups. So actually, people, and what's really good about those groups, again, it's a mixture of different individuals from the hospital. So it's not just frontline stuff. I'm part of one of the networks too, and we feed back into a lot of what happens within the organisation. So, for example, when trust policies come out, they are sent to us as well to review to ensure that actually from the different networks there is equality within those policies for everyone. So I think that actually is really, really important, because then we can read through it and say, well, hold on, what about this group? Why, have we thought about this? And so actually it's getting more perspective on those policies which really do impact on individuals. So I think from that side, I think there is progress.
Thanks, Frances. So yeah, I mean, I don't work in the NHS anymore, but just going back to the work that we're carrying out with the IBMS, we're also in the middle of updating the EDI policy, and again, something that we've all been able to kind of contribute to, read and review and just make sure that we've not missed anything out, and that just making sure that it's updated and that members will have access to it, and actually, it represents the work that we're doing.
Brilliant. If anyone has got any questions they'd like to ask, I'm aware we just have a couple of minutes left. So just while I'm waiting to see if anything else comes in, I suppose one final thing for me is if people are listening and they're going to take away one action point, or it doesn't need to be an action point, it can just be something for them to consider, something for them to think about. Well, what's the one thing, Frances, that you would like people to go away with from tonight's IBMS chat?
Oh, okay. So I think I kind of have two. So I'm going to put them both out there, but I'll kind of make them one. I think it's just openness. Again, asking questions, and not being guarded when asking, and actually being free to kind of talk to individuals and to learn from each other. I think that's really key. But the other one, I think, is just bias and unconscious bias. Don't judge a book by its cover. I think it's important to meet an individual. You sometimes meet someone and you just automatically make a judgment, but then actually when you talk to them, find about their background, their history, it can be absolutely fascinating to learn that actually there may be so much history or experience or lived experience that they have. So for me, I think it's openness and unconscious bias.
Very nice, Frances. And anything from you, Tamina, on that one?
Yeah, I wanted to say openness as well. But yeah, thank you for covering that one, Frances.
Bias, then you can take openness.
Yeah, just being open to learn, really, and taking it on board. If you're asking questions, then actually utilising that.
Brilliant. Well, I can think of no better way to have marked NHS 75 than talking about such an important subject with you tonight. One final question. Are there any books or further resources you recommend if people are interested and they want to dig further into the issues? Yeah, either resources or books from either of you that you would guide people towards?
I think with the articles that we've been writing recently, so everyone who's contributed, we do usually put down links and direct people if they want to learn a bit more about the different things that we've been writing about. So they are really useful. If there's a particular area that, you know, people are wanting to learn about, they can refer to those articles.
I completely agree. And for anyone who wants to know more about those, if you feel free to drop me a message on Twitter or send me an email, and I can dig out a selection of the stuff we've run so far. There's been some really great stuff from the EDI group. We've been publishing one a month, and yeah, I think there's some really important, vital information there, and I'm really glad that we get to communicate it to everyone. Right, I think that is the end of tonight's IBMS chat. Just a massive thank you to Francis and to Mina as well for coming in. And Gemma, I'm so sorry due to technical glitches, if you're still here and still able to log on, that we weren't able to chat to you tonight. But hopefully we'll be able to get you back on here soon sometime. And I'm sure someone will be reading some of your writing in the magazine at some point soon, hopefully. But yes, thank you everyone for coming along. If questions come up that you didn't get to ask, but you're kicking yourself thinking, I wish I'd asked that, then again, feel free to message me, email them. I can get them over to Francis and Tamina, and I'll get you responses. And if anyone has any ideas for articles that they think we should be covering, things we should be doing better in the magazine, then please let me know, because I'm always up for positive change. And if we could do something better, then I would really like to know. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for the time tonight. Francis and Tamina, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Have lovely evenings, everyone, and nice to see you all.
Thanks so much for listening, and hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you did, why not tune in live to the next IBMS chat at 8 PM on the first Wednesday of every month on the IBMS Twitter feed, where you can join in live and ask the speakers questions. Just keep an eye on the IBMS social media feeds for details of the next session. Thanks again.